Hey everyone, Alex here from Japanese Masters, and today we are going to go over part 8 of lesson 2 of Minna no Nihongo. That is "そうですか?" Okay, let's go and dive right on into this. Okay, as you can see, we have our phrase "そうですか?" Let's start by translating this into English. What exactly does this mean in English? In English, this is like the phrase, I see, or, is that right? It's a response phrase, usually when you get a new piece of information. It's what's known as a set phrase in Japanese, which means that the parts of the phrase by themselves don't really mean a lot. The whole thing together, it has a meaning in itself. So if you wanted to take any of the rules and like change grammar structures, make it less polite or more polite, it really won't work with "そうですか?" because the whole phrase in itself means something. If you change any part of it, it can lose its meaning. So yeah, you'll hear this in both polite and casual conversation, just because the set phrase by itself is kind of both polite and plain. It doesn't really change with the politeness of the sentence. Also, another thing I should note is that this is usually said with a falling intonation, which means that you'd say like, "そうですか?" Like kind of a little bit of a dip down at the end there. Okay, let's go and break this down so that you know what all the parts mean. So we have our "そうです." If you remember from part 3, I believe, of this lesson, we covered "そうです," and that kind of means something like, that's right. Then we have our "ka," which is the question marking particle at the end. So together, that gives us our "is that right?" kind of thing, where you're not really asking the person if it's right. You're just like confirming that you heard what they said. I mean, we do this in English all the time. Someone will tell you some piece of information. You're like, "Oh, is that so?" Or, "Oh, is that right?" You don't really want them to say again, "Yeah, it is right." You know that it is right. You're just kind of going with the sentence. "So desu ka" is also part of what is known as an aizuchi, and that is basically the social cues that people have when speaking back and forth in Japanese. They're actually quite a lot different from America. There are a lot more of these verbal and nonverbal cues that Japanese people give back and forth when they're speaking in order to basically show that you're interested, that you are talking to the person and you're focused on them. Another big one in Japan actually is to nod when you're speaking and when you're listening. And knowing exactly when to do that is diving into linguistics and can get a little bit complicated. But just know for now that you'll actually hear "そうですか?" a lot when people are speaking, just to kind of say, oh, is that so? Like, so you're acknowledging what they said. And then here is the Kansai variant of it. If you don't know what the Kansai area is, that is the area around Osaka. That is known as the Kansai region of Japan, and they have something known as kansai-ben, or the dialect of Kansai. And I took a class on this and have a textbook on changing some things into kansai-ben, and this is one of the ones that changes pretty easily. So "そうですか?" changes into "そうなの?" and that is the kansai-ben version of it. And my host mom said this all the time. She never used "そうですか?" She always used "そうなの?" In the kansai-ben, you'll see a lot of the things are shortened to the "na" sound or the "n" sound. But yeah, getting into the dialect of that area is very, very complicated, and I still don't understand a lot of it. But just know that if you hear that, it's basically the same as "そうですか?" Okay, let's go through a couple of examples to make sure that you got this. Okay, the first one is very simple. It's just, is that right? "そうですか?" If you notice the slight lowering of the intonation as you get towards the end of the sentence. It's not, "そうですか?" You know, the normal rising intonation that you probably hear with a question. It's actually a falling intonation. The rising intonation might actually sound like a question. This one, you don't expect any response from them. You're just acknowledging what you've heard. Okay, the next example is, "No, it's mine." I see. Which translates to, "Ie, boku no desu." "そうですか?" There's probably a sentence before this, if this was an actual conversation, like saying like something like, "Is that John's book bag?" And the other person would be like, "No, it's mine." So the person's now got a new piece of information. He's just learned that it is not John's bag. So he replies with, "そうですか?" So he's acknowledging this new piece of information. He's not asking a question, even though there's the "ka" particle at the end. He is basically just acknowledging it. He's basically saying, I see, or is that so? And breaking this down a little bit, we have our structure that we learned a couple lessons ago. How you can replace the noun in a possessive with just the "no." You don't need to include the second noun. So we're also going to assume that in the previous sentence, they said whatever the subject is, whatever he's talking about. So maybe it was a book bag. So you don't need to say it again. So you can just shorten it to "boku no" instead of like "boku no kaban" or something like that. And then, of course, we have our "ie," which is "no" in Japanese, and then our phrase, the "そうですか?" Okay, let's go ahead and go into the last sentence. Okay, so for the last example, I decided to have a little bit of fun. This example is written in kansai-ben, so this, if you don't understand the grammar points of it, don't worry. It's completely different than the main Japanese grammar points that you are probably learning. I mean, it's closely related to the standard Japanese dialect, which they mostly teach the Tokyo-ben, the Tokyo dialect. However, the actual grammar is a little bit different. Okay, let's go ahead and go through this sentence. So it's, no, I have to go. Ah, is that so? Which is, ie, ikanakan, so no. Okay, so the first one is just simple. We have our ie. That one's just like normal. Here is where the grammar changes a little bit. If you know the ikanakereba narimasen form, which basically means I must, or shortened to ikanakya, or something like that, this is the same form, but in kansai-ben. Our akan here. In Tokyo-ben, you've probably heard dame. That is what's used for not good, bad a lot in Japanese. However, the Kansai variant of it is akan. And if you are in the Osaka area, you'll hear this a lot. So basically what this is saying is, in a nutshell, is not to go is bad, which is the same thing as I must go, which is exactly what the ikanakereba narimasen form says, but this is a short version and a very Kansai-ben version because of the akan here. Then over here we have the part I talked about before. Instead of so desu ka, it's so nano. So, I know, it might look a little bit complicated at first, but it's really not that hard if you start breaking it down. These structures are basically the same as the normal textbook Japanese. It's just slightly altered for the Kansai region. And then this one is just a different set phrase that you'll have to know for that area. Other than that, that is the end of today's lesson. I hope you understand so desu ka and so nano. They're really not hard. You'll hear them all the time in Japanese. You'll hear people saying it all the time when people are speaking back and forth, just to show the person that they're listening, that they've got the information that that the other person is trying to convey. It's a lot like how we'd say things in English, like, oh, is that so? Oh, okay. I understand. Yeah, I see. Stuff like that. It's just one of those phrases that you'll see in Japanese. Okay. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments below, and I'd be happy to answer them. If you have any criticisms, also put that in the comments below, and I'd be happy to address those. Other than that, I will see you guys next lesson. Keep studying Japanese. All right, everyone. See ya.